So the transfer portal closed on Friday, like we've talked about, and as we've said a bunch of times, that was the final day for players to go into the transfer portal. You'll see a few more names kind of leak out around the country, kind of yesterday, a little bit today due to business, business holidays and calendar days and all this different stuff, because you submit your paperwork to compliance and they have 48 hours, two business days to get your name into the portal. But, with the deadline being on Friday, you go through the weekend, MLK Day on Monday. So, a bit of a delay there. So you might see a few more names leaking out. But remember, that was the last day to go into the transfer portal. But apparently for Pitt, they are at the end of adding players out of the transfer portal, at least as it stands right now. Pitt announced yesterday 16 scholarship players joining the 2026 roster as transfers. We've gone over a lot of this before. We've talked about each of these guys when they committed, almost all these guys when they committed to Pitt. Kind of did an overview last week of what they still need and who they've got. But now we've got sort of an official, seemingly finalized list. So let's run it down. What did Pitt get out of the transfer portal this offseason? Who did they add? How do they fit? What did they need? Did they address their needs? Let's try and answer all of those questions. And if you might be sitting back and saying, come on, man, you've already gone over this whole transfer class like 3 times in the past couple weeks. Well, you might be right, but I could be talking basketball. It's the Wednesday edition of Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I really shouldn't use basketball as like a threat. Basketball discussion and analysis as a threat. Like, hey, you keep up that attitude, you know what we're going to do? We're going to talk hoops. I actually think Pitt's going to win tonight at Boston College. I mean, we'll see how it all works out. The last time they had, I don't know. I was trying to find like trends of like when they've had these losses, these blowout losses by 20 points or more. And well, the last time they had, I actually have this is my sheet of all the 20-point losses under Jeff Capel. There's 21 of them. But the last time Pitt got blown out by 20 points or more at home and went on the road in the next game was 2 years ago. They lost to North Carolina at home by 23, 70-57. The next game they went on the road to Louisville and they won by 13, 83-70. So that's the trend. Now, Pitt does have a record of 9-10 after 20-point blowouts under Jeff Capel. We'll see what tonight's game brings. But the last time they got blown out at home by 20 or more and went on the road in the next game, they won by 13. So H2P, baby. I think they beat Boston College tonight. Anyway, like I said, we'll talk more basketball actually tonight after the game. We'll have the live Panther-Lair show. Starting pretty much as soon as the game ends, probably right around 9 o'clock. We'll talk about what we saw in that game, break down whatever angles we can possibly come up with, and then we'll talk about transfers and anything else on your mind. So make sure you tune in tonight for the live Panther-Lair show here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Remember, it's a little bit of an audible. A lot of times we started at, most nights we start at 8:30, most Wednesday nights. Tonight we're going to start after the basketball game. If you're worried, you're like, I'm never going to remember that you changed the time. Just subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, turn on notifications, and then you'll get an alert whenever we go live, and you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. So tune in, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, like this video and subscribe, and you will be locked into it. All right, transfers. 16 scholarship transfers joining Pitt this offseason. Players coming from a variety of levels, Power 4 schools, G5 schools, FCS schools, Division II. Offense, defense, special teams, additions all over the place. And let's run it down before we, make a broad statement about it. They addressed that or they addressed this. Let's run down what they added. So the newest commitment, the most recent guy to commit as a transfer to Pitt, Holden Garner, a quarterback from Texas State. Now, he's a native of Georgia. He actually started his career at Auburn. And after the fact, I'm going to go through and count how many of these guys have transferred. This is their second or more transfer coming to Pitt. So Garner started at Auburn. He played there for about 3 years. He completed 9 passes over the course of 3 seasons. Transferred to Texas State last offseason. Played in 3 games, attempted 1 pass. He was a good high school quarterback. He was a 4-star prospect in the recruiting class of 2022. He was a good, productive player there, decent size at 6'3". And ultimately what Holden Geriner is an experienced quarterback. And when I say experienced, I mean a guy who's been in college for a few years. I mean, he's been, this will be his 5th year of college football. And, so there's a lot to be gained from that. Not a ton of on-field experience for Holden Geriner, but a lot more experience being in college football, being around college football, film study, team meetings, strength and conditioning, all those different things that you do. He's been a part of it far more than Angelo Renda and Corey Daly. No disrespect to those guys, but they're coming in completely green, no experience whatsoever. At least Holden Geriner gives you an older guy, a little more mature, a little more advanced, in understanding the sport to be your backup for Mason Heichel. And you get into the season, you start, looking at that question of, well, if it's, if Heichel has to miss one snap, do you go with Geriner? And if he has to miss more time, do you go with one of the freshmen? That's down the road. We can consider that. I mean, I think that was pretty clearly the plan this past year with Eli Holstein, that if he had to miss just one play, his helmet comes off at West Virginia or something like that, then Cole Gonzalez gets the call. But if they're going to make a longer-term change, or they have to make a longer-term change, they go to the true freshman Mason Heichel. We'll see if that's what the plan is with Holden Geriner and the 2 incoming freshmen. But for now, Geriner's going to come in, probably be the top backup for Heichel, and in an ideal world, never really be needed other than at the end of some blowout wins, in an ideal world. Next guy on offense, Lavelle Wright, a running back transferring from Western Kentucky. He actually started his career at Kentucky, then transferred to Austin Peay, then transferred to Western Kentucky in 2025. This past year, he ran for 471 yards, team high 10 touchdowns on just 85 rushing attempts. So he averaged more, 5.5 yards per carry. He scored 10 touchdowns on 85 carries, and perhaps, one of the biggest things, he's a 6 foot, 222-pound running back. And so what Lavelle Wright brings, in addition to experience and some productivity, is size. He comes in and brings some size to a Pitt running back room that doesn't have a ton of it. You knew they were going to need some experienced depth to play behind Jakiri and Turner, in addition to, Justin Cook coming back, and the redshirt freshman Sinquan Smith and Jalen Brown, the incoming true freshman, Damon Ferguson. You would like to have another veteran guy there, and ideally somebody with a little bit of size, and that's what Lavelle Wright provides as a running back transfer from Western Kentucky. Another skill guy transferring in, not Lavelle Wright, it's Malik Knight. Malik Knight, a wide receiver transfer from where else? Western Carolina. He's 6'2", 185, so he's bigger than Raphael Williams and Sincere Lee and Desmond Reed. Bigger than, specifically the wide receivers, bigger than Raphael Williams and Sincere Lee. The other receivers they've gotten from Western Carolina. Kind of quiet first few years of college football, but this past season he broke out, 47 catches, 774 yards, 7 touchdowns, a stat line that's pretty comparable to what Raphael Williams and Sincere Lee did during their time at Western Carolina, and pretty comparable to what Raphael Williams did the last 2 years at Pitt. Feels like it has a chance to be a more or less even trade for the loss of Raphael Williams, but this brings in one of the biggest questions, I think, with the transfer portal with Pitt this offseason, of whether they did enough. Is you didn't just lose Raphael Williams from last year's roster. You also lost Kenny Johnson. We've talked about this a million times. We talked about this as we've broken down the transfer portal class. We talked about this last week when we asked if they did enough at wide receiver. For me, the overwhelming answer is no. They did not do enough at wide receiver. They didn't do enough for what they need at receiver. They didn't do enough for the opportunity that they should have here with Mason Heichel, like we talked yesterday about, building a playoff caliber team. You have to identify and take advantage of those windows when you have a quarterback who's lined up to, potentially have a big season. You need to maximize that and get him some good pass catching targets. And they just added one to the receiving group. They added one, Malik Knight, the transfer from Western Carolina, seemingly counting on a big bounce back year for Sincere Lee and some big step up performances for some of the younger guys like Bryce Yates and Tony Kinsler and, Rodney Dunbar and Dylan Western, Demetrius McCray, these incoming freshmen. I mean, guys are going to have to step up because they really didn't do much to fill out the room from the portal. They did do a lot to fill out the tight end room from the transfer portal. Elijah Lag transferring from UAB. He did not play somewhere else before transferring to UAB. He was at a junior college before he went to UAB. But the other tight end they're bringing in, Carson Kent, coming to Pitt from Oklahoma. But before that, he was at Kennesaw State for 2 years. Didn't do a lot at Oklahoma, caught 3 passes there, but in 2 years at Kennesaw State, put up 380 yards, 3 touchdowns, 32 catches, 6'4", 247-pound tight end. I think Carson Kent is really the highlight of the transfer portal class at tight end. I mean, there's 2 guys, so I mean, it's like, well, you like one more than the other guy. I do think Kent has a chance to be a Justin Holmes type in this offense and put up similar numbers and have similar production to what Justin Holmes had. I don't know if he'll get a 100-yard, game in the bowl, but I think, he can have that kind of impact. I think they're looking for him to have that kind of impact. And Elijah Lag, a 6'4", 240-pound guy coming from UAB, got 20 passes last season. Fills out the depth nicely. You take those 2 guys plus Max Hunt, who's going to be a redshirt freshman, plus Wyatt Villarreal, who's going to be a true freshman coming in. I think you got a pretty decent group there, and different types of players. Lag and Kent, maybe a bit more traditional tight ends. Hunt and Villarreal more of the sort of big receiver, fast tight end, pass catching tight end options. And I think you can mix and match those guys and get a pretty good combination. And then the final 2 guys on offense, 2 offensive linemen, Natino Olivieri from Penn and Keelan Davis from Akron. And I think Olivieri is the highlight here. 2-time all Ivy League selection, first team all Ivy League. He was the starting left tackle for Penn each of the last 3 seasons. He's played a lot. He's played well. He's got a lot of experience. And I think, we continue to have this debate, or we've had this debate a bunch of times, and I think there are different opinions on it. It's kind of your own personal philosophy on what you think. But, if you go into that question of would you bring someone out of the portal, would you rather have the guy coming from a lower level where he played a lot and played well, or the guy coming from another Power 4 school where maybe he was a backup? And it's Stefano Millen versus Jeff Percy. Stefano Millen's really the best example because he played a lot at that lower level. I mean, maybe you could say like Kendall Stanley versus Nolan Alizio. Remember him? They brought him in. He was the next year's after Stefano Millen. They brought in Nolan Alizio to be the transfer tackle. He came from Michigan, I think, actually, and didn't really play much there. Started every game at Pitt, but wasn't especially good. I like the productive, experienced, successful guys from the lower level. I think you've got a higher chance of success with those guys. And actually, I'm pretty bullish on Natino Olivieri. I think he can be pretty good for Pitt. I think he can step in and be their starting left tackle in 2026 and probably be an upgrade at that position. Keelan Davis, a 2-year starter at guard for Akron. He was a 3rd-team All-MAC selection this past year. Veteran guy, played a bunch, pretty decent, resume, had some success. He gets into that mix in the interior spots, whether it's at guard or center, whatever it might be. And now you have a lot of options there on how you want to work it out. And I think you have options across the offensive line, depending on what you want to do with Kendall Stanley and what you want to do with Ryan Baer. I think you've got a bunch of options on how you can sort of piece this together. I think Olivieri was the important one to add as a left tackle. And then Davis, I think, really kind of makes that room a little more crowded in a good way as they try and find the best options to get their top 5 guys out there. You flip over to defense, they got 2 defensive tackles. Elite Nairn, coming from Tulane. He started at Liberty. He was there in 2024. He had 25 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, a sack. In 2024, played in a rotation at Tulane. He's 6'1", 305, and both of the tackles they brought in, Elite Nairn from Tulane and Jeremiah Warren from Illinois, they're both big guys. Warren is 6'3", 310, and Nairn is 6'1", 305, so they're adding size there, which they haven't really had a ton of over the years. I mean, you look at the guys, I guess Francis Brew was a bigger guy, but Jasir Whittington was not a bigger guy. Sean Fitzsimmons isn't all that big. I wouldn't consider Nick James to be that big of a guy. They tried to move Nakai Johnson inside. Obviously, you get to some of the more high-end examples like Kalijah Cansey, Jalen Twyman. You go back to Aaron Donald, but just sticking within the Narduzzi era, they've had more of these smaller defensive tackles, and some of the best tackles they've had have been smaller guys. Some of the most productive defensive tackles they've had have been smaller guys. And so they haven't really had that kind of size, but I think you bring in Elite Nairn and Jeremiah Warren, and you put them together with Sean Fitzsimmons and Nick James, potentially Isaiah Neal if he moves back to defensive tackle, and it'd be interesting to see what happens there. They like Trevor Summers a lot as a redshirt freshman. You got some options there. I kind of think maybe you move Neal back to defensive tackle because I think you've got more options at end than you do at tackle, but that's something the coaches ideally have already figured out and will figure out by spring camp. But Nairn and Warren both coming in to kind of shore up the depth there at defensive tackle. 2 linebackers that Pitt recruited, not necessarily going to be guys that are going to replace Rasheem Biles and Kyle Lewis, but 2 experienced, good options. Alex Sanford, who started his career at Arkansas for a couple years, transferred to Purdue, started 9 games last season. He was Purdue's 5th leading tackler with 46 stops. He had 3.5 tackles for loss and a fumble recovery. Looks like an outside linebacker for Pitt. Maybe potentially could play in the middle, but probably an outside linebacker would be my guess. And then the other one, DeMarco Ward, a 6'2", 215-pound outside linebacker. I think he's going to be really good. He actually started his career at Florida State, and then he transferred to Memphis this past season. He had 55 tackles. I just want to be like 55 tackles for loss, 55 sacks, 55 interceptions, 55 forced fumbles, 55 fumble recoveries. And there's like 3 of you that'll get that joke. No, but with Memphis last year, he had 55 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 2 interceptions. I think he's going to be really good. I think he's got a chance to play at that star linebacker position. Could probably play any of the 3 spots, and I think he'll play a lot this year. I think he's going to be a pretty exciting guy to watch for Pitt. And, linebacker, like we've talked about, with a bunch of these positions on defense and certainly linebacker recently, I'm going to take the staff's judgment on these guys because they've got a pretty strong recent track record of identifying good linebackers and guys who fit this defense well, and those guys working out. So, I'm kind of bullish on those 2. Then in the secondary, a couple of cornerbacks. Rayon Strader transferring from Auburn. A kid, he was actually a Penn Hills native. Started his career at Miami of Ohio. He was a freshman All-American there. He was the MAC cornerback of the year in 2024. Then he transferred to Auburn. He was in the rotation at Auburn at corner last year. 2 years at Miami, rotational guy at Auburn, but his 2 years at Miami of Ohio, he had 110 tackles, 3 interceptions, and 37 pass breakups. I'll take that. I think you'll take that, and I think Pitt's secondary will certainly take that. And the other guy, Kanye Thompson, another Whippio guy, McKeesport native. He's at Slippery Rock. In 2025, he had 60 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 10 pass breakups, 4 forced fumbles. And these 2 guys both coming in to play corner at Pitt. Thompson's got a lot of speed. He'll be a return guy as well. And Strader, like I say, 37 pass breakups in 2 seasons at Miami of Ohio. You'll take that. You'll take that productivity and that stat line any day. And those guys will jump into the rotation. You're bringing back Shadarian Harrison. You're bringing back Sean Lee. You've got some younger corners who came in the last 2 years. But if you put Strader and Thompson with Harrison and Lee, that looks like a really, really strong 2-deep to me in whatever combination you come up with for those guys. But you can rotate them, play them all. And then they had 3 specialists coming in, and these 3 specialists, scholarship guys. They had some walk-ons coming as well. But the 3 scholarship specialists coming in all replace needs. So Sam Hunsaker coming in as a transfer from Northern Arizona, a guy from Arizona. He comes in to replace Trey Bukowski, who transferred after 1 season at Pitt. Hunsaker, this past season, 11 of 15 on field goals, 45 of 45 on his point after attempts. Losing Bukowski, you needed to find a kicker, and they found a guy with some experience, a guy who, he'll be a junior. He played 2 seasons of college football already, and that's probably the profile you're looking for, an experienced guy that could come in and be your starting kicker. Ditto for the punter, Gabe Russo, guy transferring from Idaho State. He actually started his career at Auburn, transferred to Idaho State, and then, he was probably one of the best punters in the FCS. He averaged his net yards per punt were 42, a little more than 42. Second team all conference. He was a finalist for the FCS Punter of the Year award. Caleb Junko's gone. You need a new punter? Here you go. Got one out of the portal. guy who knows how to play, guy who's got a lot of experience and looks pretty good. And then Justin Schmidt, Thomas Jefferson graduate. He's been at Purdue this past season. He redshirted. He'll be a long snapper. So Pitt had some long snappers leave, go to the portal, graduate, whatever it may be. They needed a long snapper. Justin Schmidt will come in and be that, and be a, I believe he's on scholarship. Let me just double check. I believe he is. I think all three of those specialists, yes, are coming in to be on scholarship. They've got some more coming in, some walk-ons and things like that. But those are the 16 scholarship guys that Pitt is bringing in as transfers. I think the biggest question mark is at wide receiver and whether they did enough there. And maybe the staff is just putting a lot of hope and belief in the guys they have coming back. Maybe they felt like they didn't need any more receivers out of the transfer portal. I have a hard time believing that. I have a hard time believing that that's what they believed. I have a hard time, endorsing that way of thinking if it is what they believed. But for whatever reason, they're only bringing in one wide receiver. I think they needed offensive linemen, and they got, at the very least, a starting left tackle out of the portal, and that's a good start. I think they shored up the positions that needed to be shored up on defense. Probably could have used a defensive end, but, what are you going to do? And a safety, but they got the linebackers they needed. The cornerback position looks strong. And I kind of trust their safety recruiting enough that I think they'll be okay. It just would have been nice to find another, Kavir Baines Marquez type. But that's the 16 scholarship players that Pitt is bringing in. We'll see how they do. They'll all be here for spring camp, and we'll see where they are in August, or how they contribute in August. Don't forget, we'll be live tonight after Pitt Boston College. That game tips off at 7 o'clock. We'll be live when it ends, probably right around 9, talking about the game, talking about transfers, talking about everything going on in the world of Pitt sports on the live Panther-Lair show right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. Of course, check out the website Panther-Lair.com. to get all the Pitt sports news you can possibly handle. All right, thanks so much for tuning in today. Hope you've had a great week so far. Enjoy your Wednesday, and we'll catch up with you tonight for the live Panther-Lair show, and then tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.